a messenger bursts through the castle gates. A huge army is marching toward the castle. It will be here in 2 days. The commandant immediately sends men to the surrounding villages. They round up livestock, haul away grain, and gather everything edible they can carry. Peasants pour inside with their children, goats, and bundles. Everything that grew or stood near the walls is cut down and demolished so the enemy has nowhere to hide, so that the foe gets neither shelter nor timber. The village is set ablaze, the drawbridge is raised. A day or 2 later, the sentries on the tower spot dust on the horizon. A vast cloud of dust, followed soon by banners. Several thousand men slowly fill the valley around the castle. They pitch tents, light fires, and build a palisade. And so begins the siege of a medieval castle. The castle, which normally houses 100 to 200 people, suddenly has to shelter 500 or more. People sleep in corridors, in stables beside the horses, on the floor of the great hall, pressed tightly against one another. The commandant counts the supplies: barrels of grain, salt meat, dried fish, cheese, ale. Everything is carried into the dungeon, the main tower, and placed under guard. Every scrap of bread is now issued by strict count. Meanwhile, the besieging army assembles siege towers and rolls them, covered in wet hides, right up to the walls. Inside each tower are dozens of soldiers on several levels. Those below push, those above wait. The defenders hurl torches at them and shoot at the men shoving from below. Sometimes the tower catches fire, and the men inside burn alive before they can escape. And if the tower does reach the wall, a bridge drops, and the first warriors leap onto the battlements. They are met with spears, swords, whatever is at hand. The fighting rages on a narrow strip of wall just a couple of meters wide. The crowd presses from both sides. Those behind shove those in front. The fallen plunge to their deaths. The assault fails, the defenders manage to beat it back. But the enemy prepares a new, cleverer attempt. Sappers begin digging a tunnel. The entrance is hidden inside a tent far beyond the reach of the archers. The tunnel is shored up with wooden beams, and the excavated earth is carried away at night. When the passage reaches the foundation of the wall, the beams are set alight, the ground subsides, and part of the wall collapses. But the defenders try to detect the mining early. They place basins of water on the ground. If the surface trembles, someone is digging below. Then they dig a counter-tunnel. Underground, in total darkness, men clash and fight with knives, shovels, and bare hands. The defenders win and collapse the enemy's tunnel roof. Meanwhile, on the surface, the besiegers keep up the bombardment. Catapults hurl not only stones but also pots of burning pitch, and sometimes the corpses of people and animals who died of disease. This is medieval biological warfare. The goal is to infect the defenders so they surrender without a fight. At times, hives of bees are flung over the walls. The bees sting the soldiers through the gaps in their armor. Between barrages, the defenders put on a show. They shout insults about the besiegers' wives and mothers, turn around, and deliberately drop their trousers, baring their backsides to the enemy army. They slap their buttocks and roar with laughter. It's a calculated move to enrage the foe and provoke a reckless assault. Sometimes the defenders tie a donkey to the wall, dressing it in the armor of an enemy knight captured the day before. The entire army below watches as the wind flaps their comrade's banner on the backside of the bucking animal. Psychological warfare flows both ways. The besiegers are no less ruthless. Prisoners are executed in full view of the walls to break the defender's spirit. Catapults fling the severed heads of fallen comrades over the battlements. Both sides try to convince the other that everything is going splendidly. There is a famous trick used in several sieges. When only one pig remains in the castle, it is fattened up and then hurled, plump and well-fed, over the wall into the enemy camp. The foe sees the fat, healthy pig and thinks, "They're eating so well they can throw away pigs. We'll be stuck here for years." But inside the castle, the storerooms are empty and people have gone days without food. Time inside the castle drags unbearably. The morning begins with prayer. The chaplain holds mass briefly and without ceremony. People pray with all their hearts, for any day could be their last. Then comes the food distribution. The longer the siege lasts, the smaller the portions. In the first week there is bread and porridge, after a month thin gruel, after 2 months a handful of grain per person per day. The soldiers receive more because they must stand on the walls. Women, children, and the elderly make do with crumbs. Yet even in this hell, people remain people. They play dice, tell stories, sing songs. Someone manages to brew beer from whatever he can find. Women sew and mend clothes, hands must stay busy. Children play at siege, building tiny fortresses from stones and storming them with sticks, copying what they see every day on the walls. The stench in the castle is unbearable. Hundreds of people, dozens of animals, no sanitation. Castles have so-called garderobes, stone niches with a hole through which everything drops into the moat or down the wall. But with 5 times the normal population, these niches cannot cope. People relieve themselves wherever they can. Flies, rats, rotting waste. Dysentery cuts people down faster than enemy arrows. One sick person in the cramped space infects 10 others. There is nothing to treat them with and no one to do it. At best, the castle has a single physician who can do little. It is impossible to bury the dead outside the walls, and throwing their own bodies over the wall is a sin. Without burial, the soul will find no peace. The chaplain would never allow it, and the garrison might revolt. Besides, the enemy could pick up the bodies and catapult them back, already rotting and diseased. The cellars are out of the question. That is where the grain, salt meat, water, and weapons are stored. To place a decaying corpse next to the food supplies would poison everything left. So the bodies are stacked in the courtyard in the open air. After several months, the true famine begins, the kind from which people never recover. First the horses are slaughtered, then the dogs, then the cats, then rats are caught. People chew leather belts and boot soles, boiling them for hours to make something like broth. They eat bark, grass, anything that can be stuffed into a mouth. The besiegers fling notes over the walls. To anyone who opens the gates at night, gold, land, and freedom. A siege can end in many ways. Sometimes a relief army appears on the horizon. The enemy finds itself caught between 2 fires and retreats. Most often the sides come to terms. There is an unwritten rule. If the castle has held out long enough to save the commandant's honor, the garrison may surrender with their lives intact. But if the defenders hold out to the bitter end, the castle is taken by storm. And sometimes the end comes quietly, without assault or banners. The food simply runs out. Then the commandant makes the hardest decision of all. He orders the useless mouths driven out beyond the walls, those who cannot fight. The women, the elderly, the children, so the remaining soldiers will have food for a few more weeks. The gates open for a few minutes. The people are pushed outside. The gates slam shut, but the enemy does not let them pass. The calculation is simple. While these people are trapped between the walls and the army, they exert moral pressure on the defenders. The garrison watches its starving wives and children freezing in the cold. It breaks the spirit. That is exactly what happened during the siege of Chateau Gallard in 1203, when Philip II of France besieged the fortress of the English king. The garrison thrust about 400 civilians outside the walls. The French army refused to let them through. These people, caught between the 2 lines, ate grass. According to some accounts, they even ate one another. Roughly half died of cold and hunger. The French king eventually took pity on the survivors and allowed them to pass. For the civilian population, a siege usually ended badly. In the best case, if the castle surrendered by agreement, it passed to the victor and the peasants simply got a new master. They were part of the castle's property, but there was nothing to return to. The village was burned, the fields trampled, the livestock slaughtered, the stores consumed. If the castle was taken by storm, there was no mercy. The soldiers did not distinguish between soldier and civilian. Plunder, murder, rape, all of it was considered lawful reward. The warriors could retreat into the dungeon and continue fighting. The civilians could not. And if the siege dragged on too long, they were simply driven out the gates as useless mouths.